All stories are dramatized recreations. Named locations are fictionalized. Any resemblance to real persons is coincidental.
Amelia, veterinarian. The leather of the therapy couch was cold and sticky against the back of my thighs, a sensation so trivial it was almost offensive. How could the world still contain such mundane, physical details when mine was ending? Dr. Evans' office smelled of sandalwood and false hope, a scent I would forever associate with the precise moment my 11-year marriage dissolved into dust. Daniel sat beside me, his posture a perfect sculpture of contrite effort. He'd been the one to suggest these sessions, to bridge the growing distance, he'd said. His knee was a careful, deliberate inch from mine, a performance. For who? For Dr. Evans? For me? Or for the ghost of the man he used to be? Amelia, Dr. Evans said, her voice a calibrated instrument of calm. You mentioned feeling a sense of disconnection. That Daniel has been more distant lately. Can you elaborate on what that feels like for you? I looked at my hands, at the simple platinum band on my left hand. I thought of the frantic energy of my day, the press of a scared animal against my chest, the cold nose of a German shepherd trusting me to make it better. I thought of coming home to silence, to a husband who was physically present but emotionally on another continent. It feels like, I began, my voice raspy. I cleared my throat. It feels like I'm living with a very polite roommate, one who remembers to take the trash out but forgets to look me in the eye. He's been working so much. Late nights. Client dinners. I chanced a glance at Daniel. His jaw was tight, a muscle flickering. He nodded, a somber, agreeing nod, the good husband trying so hard. Daniel, Dr. Evans prompted. The McAllister account has been all-consuming, he said, his voice smooth, practiced, the voice he used in boardrooms. I know I've been absent. It's not fair to Amelia or to Chloe. He said our daughter's name like a key, something he could use to unlock sympathy. I'm here to do the work, to be better. He reached over then and his fingers brushed my hand. His skin was warm. The touch was a lie. It was the same hand that had held mine through a miscarriage, through the terrifying first days of Chloe's life, through my father's funeral. Now it felt alien, a prop, and then I saw it. As he pulled his hand back to gesture, explaining his stress, his commitment to us, the sleeve of his crisp blue dress shirt rode up, just a fraction. And there, on the soft skin of his wrist, was a faint, almost imperceptible smudge of pink glitter. The world didn't slow down. It atomized. It shattered into a million glittering, pink shards. My mind, the part that diagnoses a parasite from a single symptom, that connects a limp to a hairline fracture, began to work. Pink glitter. It wasn't from Chloe. Her current obsession was dinosaur stickers. It wasn't from me. It was cheap, cosmetic glitter, the kind from a drugstore eyeshadow palette or a body spray. The kind a 20-something might wear. A client dinner. A memory, sharp and sudden. A week ago, I'd needed to return a pair of shoes. I'd used his wallet because mine was upstairs. He'd flinched just for a microsecond when I'd picked it up. Don't lose the receipt, babe, he joked, too quickly. I'd brushed it off. Now the memory screamed. My heart was a frantic, caged bird beating against my ribs. Dr. Evans was saying something about communication strategies. Daniel was nodding earnestly, and I was falling down a rabbit hole inside my own mind. His credit card statement. It had come last week. I'd opened it, a mundane marital task. A charge for La Belle Epoque, $287.50, had given me a flicker of curiosity. A fancy French restaurant, a client dinner, he'd said when I'd asked offhandedly. Very stuffy, you wouldn't have liked it. He'd kissed my forehead. I'd believed him. I'd felt a pang of guilt for doubting his hard work. But La Belle Epoque wasn't stuffy. A new girl at the clinic, Sarah, had raved about it just yesterday. It's this incredible, intimate little tapas place, she'd said. So romantic, all pink velvet and gold glitter. My boyfriend took me for our anniversary. Pink velvet, gold glitter, the pink glitter on his wrist, the charge on his card, the late nights, the distance. The pieces clicked together with a soundless, devastating finality. The polite roommate wasn't just absent. He was living a whole other life, and he'd come here, to this sanctimonious, sandalwood-scented room, to perform the role of a repentant husband. I couldn't breathe. The air was thick with his deception. I stood up. The movement was jerky, uncoordinated. Amelia, Dr. Evans's voice was laced with professional concern. "Are you all right?" Daniel looked up at me, his face a mask of confused worry. "Honey, what's wrong?" I couldn't speak. The words were trapped behind a dam of pure, undiluted pain. I pointed a trembling finger at his wrist. He looked down, his brow furrowed. Then his eyes widened. The color drained from his face. The performance cracked, and for one breathtaking second, I saw the raw, panicked truth behind it. He quickly pulled his sleeve down, his movements frantic. That was all the confirmation I needed. The dam broke. "You," I whispered, the word a shard of glass in my throat. "You took her there, to the Pink Glitter restaurant. You told me it was a client dinner." "Amelia, it's not what you think," he began, the boardroom's smoothness gone, replaced by a desperate, wheedling tone. "Don't," I cut him off, my voice gaining strength, fueled by a fury so white-hot it was terrifying. "Don't you dare lie to me in this room that you paid for to teach you how to lie to me better." I looked at Dr. Evans, whose pen was frozen above her notepad. "How much of this is real? Any of it? Or is this just another item on your to-do list? 1. Manage McAllister account. 2. Cheat on wife. 3. Gaslight wife in therapy." I grabbed my purse. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely clutch the strap. "Amelia, please, let's talk about this," Daniel pleaded, standing up, reaching for me. I recoiled as if his touch were acid. "Don't touch me. You don't get to touch me ever again." I turned and walked out of the office. I walked down the hallway, my heels clicking a frantic, staccato rhythm on the polished floor. I made it to the parking garage, to the comforting, familiar smell of concrete and car exhaust. I yanked open the door of my sensible SUV, the car we'd bought for family road trips, and collapsed into the driver's seat. And then, in the dark, silent privacy of my car, the earthquake hit. The sobs were ripped from a place so deep inside me I didn't know it existed. They were raw, guttural, ugly. I cried for the 11 years. I cried for the man I thought I'd married. I cried for the future I had pictured, the one with gray-haired Daniel and me on a porch, surrounded by grandchildren. I cried for my daughter, for the intact family I could no longer give her. I cried until my throat was raw and my head throbbed. I sat there for a long time, until the storm subsided into a numb, hollow ache. The world outside continued. A car started. Someone laughed. Life, oblivious and cruel, went on. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes were swollen, my mascara was a tragic mess down my cheeks. I looked like a woman who had just lost everything. And then I did the only thing I could think to do. I picked up my phone. My fingers, still trembling, navigated to a browser. I didn't call a friend. I didn't call my mother. I typed 3 words into the search bar, a desperate, insane lifeline thrown into the digital void. Solo trip Iceland. It wasn't a plan. It was a scream given form. It was a reaction to a pain so vast that the only logical response was to run to the farthest, coldest, most alien landscape I could imagine. A place where the ground itself was new, forged in fire and ice, because the ground beneath my own feet had just turned to ash. The confirmation email for a one-way ticket landed in my inbox as I sat in that dark garage. I had no plan, no hotel, no itinerary, just a ticket out. I started the car. The engine purred to life. I didn't know where I was going to go, I just knew I couldn't go home. Not to the house that was now just a set for his play, filled with props of our dead life. The hook was in my heart, and it had just been yanked, tearing me out of the deep, comfortable water of my ignorance. I was gasping on the deck of my new reality, and the only thing I knew for cert was that the woman in the rearview mirror, the broken-hearted veterinarian, had to die. I didn't know what would emerge from this pain. I only knew I had to go somewhere the air didn't smell like sandalwood and lies. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and tears. I navigated the familiar streets of our Charlotte neighborhood on autopilot, my mind replaying the scene in Dr. Evans' office on a torturous loop. The look on his face, the panic, the pathetic attempt to cover his wrist. Each memory was a fresh stab wound. I pulled into our driveway, the driveway of the house we'd bought 4 years ago, the one with the big oak tree perfect for a swing for Chloe, the one with the garden I'd never quite found the time to plant, and killed the engine. The silence was deafening. I didn't go inside. I sat there in the dark car, staring at our home, our home. The word felt like a lie now. It was just a house. A structure built on a foundation of secrets. Every light in the living room was on, a sure sign Daniel was already here, waiting, pacing, probably rehearsing his next performance. I took a deep, shuddering breath. The scent of the car, old coffee, disinfectant from the clinic, the faint, sweet smell of Chloe's forgotten fruit snacks was suddenly suffocating. I had to go in there, I had to face him. But the woman who walked out of that therapy session was gone, replaced by a raw, exposed nerve. I didn't know who I was anymore, but I knew I couldn't be his wife. Not after this. The front door felt heavier than usual. The click of the lock turning sounded like a gunshot in the quiet night. I pushed it open. He was right there, standing in the middle of the living room, still in his dress shirt, though he'd loosened his tie. His hands were shoved deep in his pockets, the picture of contrite anxiety. He'd probably been standing there for 20 minutes perfecting the pose. "Amelia," he started, his voice low, careful. "Please, let me explain." I didn't look at him. I walked past him, dropping my purse on the hallway table, my keys clattering against the wood. I went straight to the kitchen, my movements mechanical. I needed water. My throat was sandpaper. I was aware of him following me, a shadow of my movements. "It's not what you think," he said, the words so cliché they made me want to scream. He was leaning against the doorframe, watching me fill a glass from the tap. "Her name is Jessica. She's a junior analyst on the McAllister team. It was a mistake. One time, it meant nothing." I turned around, the cold glass in my hand. I looked at him, really looked at him. The man I'd loved for over a decade. The father of my child. The man who used to bring me coffee in bed every Sunday. The man who cried when our daughter was born. And I saw a stranger. A handsome, terrified stranger spinning a very weak story. "One time," my voice was flat, eerily calm, "you took her to a romantic tapas bar that charges $300 for dinner. You got glitter on you. People don't get glitter on them from one-time mistakes in a conference room, Daniel. They get glitter on them from laughter, from leaning in clothes, from fun." He flinched. "It was a dinner. It got out of hand. I had too much to drink. Stop." The word was a whip crack. "Just stop. You're insulting us both. You planned it. You lied about where you were. You used our money to pay for it. You looked me in the eye for weeks and you lied. You sat in therapy and you lied." I took a step toward him. "How long?" He looked down at his shoes. The expensive Italian loafers I'd bought him for his last birthday. "A few months." The air left my lungs. Months, he hadn't slipped. He'd embarked. He'd built a parallel life, brick by lying brick, while I was busy stitching up cats and helping our daughter with her spelling homework. "Months," I repeated, the word tasting like ash. I set the glass down on the counter with a thud that was too loud. "Get out." His head snapped up. "What?" "Get out of my house." I enunciated every word, my voice trembling now, the calm fracturing. "I want you to leave. Right now. Amelia, be reasonable. This is my house too. We need to talk about this. For Chloe." "Do not say her name," I shouted, the sound tearing from my throat. "Do not use our daughter as a shield for your disgusting behavior. You should have thought about Chloe before you started fucking your junior analyst." He looked shocked. I never swore. I was the calm one, the reasonable one, the veterinarian who could soothe a terrified Great Dane. But that woman was gone. "Where am I supposed to go?" he asked, and there it was, a flash of petulant anger beneath the remorse. The real him peeking through the cracks. "I don't care," I yelled, throwing my hands up. "Go to a hotel, go to her place, sleep in your fucking car, I don't care, but you are not sleeping under this roof tonight." We stood there, facing off in the kitchen we'd designed together, over the island where we'd shared thousands of meals. The air was thick with hatred and heartbreak. I could see the calculation in his eyes. He was weighing his options. Arguing, leaving, trying to physically stay. Finally, his shoulders slumped in defeat, or what looked like defeat. Another performance. "Okay," he said softly. "Okay, I'll go, I'll give you some space, but we will talk about this tomorrow." He turned and walked out of the kitchen. I heard his footsteps on the stairs, going to our bedroom, to pack a bag. I stood frozen in the middle of the kitchen, listening to the sounds of my husband leaving me. The opening and closing of drawers. The quiet zip of a suitcase. A few minutes later, he came back down, a small overnight bag in his hand. He paused in the hallway looking at me. He looked sad, he looked sorry, he was so good at it. "I love you, Amelia," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "This was a terrible mistake. I will do anything to fix this. I didn't answer. I just stared at him, my arms wrapped tightly around myself, holding the broken pieces of me together. He opened the front door. The sound of the crickets and the humid North Carolina night air rushed in. Then the door clicked shut. And he was gone. The silence that descended was absolute. And terrifying, I was alone. The reality of it hit me like a physical blow. I slid down the cabinet onto the cold tile floor, the sobs returning, silent this time, racking my body. I cried for the finality of it, the door closing, the sound of his car starting and driving away. After a long time, the tears stopped. I was empty, hollowed out. I pushed myself up, my body aching. I wandered through the house, a ghost in my own life. I ended up in our bedroom. It smelled like him, his cologne, his shampoo. The bed was unmade, his pillow still indented from where he'd slept last night, next to me, while he was having an affair. A fresh wave of nausea hit me. I couldn't sleep here. I couldn't even be in here. I went to Chloe's room instead. She was at a sleepover, thankfully, spared from this. I curled up on her small bed, surrounded by her stuffed animals and the innocent, sweet smell of baby shampoo. I hugged her favorite unicorn tight to my chest and stared at the glow-in-the-dark stars on her ceiling. This was my life now. Hiding in my daughter's room, hiding from the life I'd built in the room down the hall. The life that was a lie. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, a text from Daniel. At the Marriott downtown. I'm so sorry, Please text me when you're ready to talk. I love you. I didn't reply. I just stared at the message until the screen went black. I thought about the glitter. I thought about the restaurant charge. I thought about a few months. The detective in my mind, the one that had connected the dots in therapy, was now wide awake and ravenous. It needed more. It needed to know the full, horrific extent of it. I got up. I walked back to our bedroom, my heart pounding with a morbid, painful curiosity. I went to his side of the bed, to his nightstand. I pulled open the drawer. It was a jumble of charging cables, old receipts, a few paperbacks, a spare set of headphones. My fingers brushed against cold, smooth plastic. I pulled it out. It was a cheap, disposable phone, a burner phone. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a premeditated operation. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely turn it on. The screen lit up. It was password protected, of course, but I knew Daniel. He was arrogant. He was lazy. He used the same 4-digit code for everything, our anniversary. With trembling fingers, I input the numbers, 0 6 1 2. The phone unlocked. The screen was a portal to hell. Text message threads, photos, everything was with her. Jessica. There were hundreds of messages. I scrolled, my vision blurring with a fresh set of tears. Can't stop thinking about last night. You're incredible. I wish I didn't have to go home to her. This is real, right? What we have. She doesn't understand me like you do. We'll figure it out, I promise, just be patient. I clicked on the photos. There they were, smiling in a bar I didn't recognize. A selfie of her, wearing his shirt in a hotel room. Him, asleep in a bed that wasn't ours. I dropped the phone like it had burned me. It clattered on the hardwood floor. I backed away from it, stumbling, until my legs hit the bed and I sat down hard. The realization was a cold, dark flood, drowning me. He wasn't just cheating. He was in love with her. He'd been telling her he loved her. He'd been complaining about me. He'd been building a future with her in text messages and hotel rooms while I was picking up his dry cleaning and making his dinner. The pain was different this time. It wasn't a sharp shock. It was a deep, profound crushing. The total annihilation of everything I believed was true. I had to get out. I couldn't be in this house, surrounded by the evidence of my own blindness. I had to get to Iceland. Not tomorrow. Now. I stood up, a new, frantic energy propelling me. I grabbed the suitcase from the top of the closet, the big one for family vacations, and I started throwing things into it. Not thoughtful things. Not practical things for a cold climate. I grabbed armfuls of clothes from my closet. I went to the bathroom and swept my toiletries into a bag. I was operating on pure, unadulterated panic. I dragged the heavy suitcase down the stairs, its wheels thumping on each step. I was leaving. I was really leaving. I didn't have a plan. I just had to be anywhere but here. I was at the front door, my hand on the handle, when I heard it. A small, sleepy voice from the top of the stairs. "Mommy?" I froze. My heart stopped. I turned around. Chloe was standing there, rubbing her eyes, her hair a messy halo. Her friend's mom must have brought her home early. "Sweetheart," I said, my voice cracking, "I thought you were at Sophia's." "I got a tummy ache," she mumbled, starting to come down the stairs. She saw the suitcase. Her little face crumpled in confusion. "Where are you going?" In my blind, selfish panic, I had forgotten the most important thing. My daughter. I was about to abandon her. I was about to become the mother who left. The suitcase handle slipped from my grasp. The weight of what I was about to do crashed down on me, heavier than any suitcase. I couldn't run. However much it hurt, however much I wanted to flee to the ends of the earth, I was a mother first. The pain would have to wait. The breakdown would have to be scheduled. My escape was over before it began. The hook was no longer just in my heart, it was in my soul, and it was tethered to the small, confused girl at the bottom of the stairs. I was trapped. There would be no clean break. There would only be the messy, painful, agonizing process of unpacking a life, right here in the hell he had created. The next morning, the world had not ended. The sun rose, a stubborn, cheerful insult outside Chloe's window. Birds chirped. The smell of coffee from the programmable maker I'd forgotten to cancel wafted up the stairs. Life, in its cruel, mundane way, insisted on continuing. I had not slept. I had lain in Chloe's narrow bed, her small, warm body curled into mine, and stared at the ceiling. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the texts. "She doesn't understand me like you do." The words were branded on the inside of my eyelids. I listened to her soft, even breathing, the most precious sound in the world, and I made a promise to her in the dark. However much I was breaking, I would not let it break her. The performance began at 7:03 a.m. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. "Good morning. How are you feeling? Can we talk today? I love you both so much." The audacity of it, the sheer, breathtaking gall, sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. "I love you both." He'd texted that from a hotel room after being caught in a months-long affair. He was still performing, still following the script he'd written in his head, where he was the misunderstood hero who just made a little mistake. I didn't reply. I carefully extracted myself from Chloe's grasp, tucked her unicorn under her arm, and crept out of her room. The house was a minefield of memories. The photo on the hallway wall from our vacation in Maine last summer, all of us smiling, him with Chloe on his shoulders. The stupid, ugly vase he'd bought me on our first anniversary because I'd said it was interesting. Every object was a landmine, waiting to detonate a new memory, a new shard of pain. I needed a shower. I needed to wash the smell of yesterday off me, but the master bathroom was his territory. It smelled overwhelmingly of his soap, his aftershave, the expensive hair product he used. I stood under the scalding water, crying silently so Chloe wouldn't hear, scrubbing my skin raw, trying to erase the feeling of his lie of a touch from the therapy couch. Getting Chloe ready for school was an exercise in surrealism. I moved through the motions on autopilot. Cereal poured, orange juice in the favorite cup, hair brushed into a semi-presentable ponytail. My smile felt like a cracked, brittle thing. My voice sounded too high, too bright. "Where's Daddy?" she asked around a mouthful of Cheerios, her big eyes innocent. The question was a knife to the heart. I leaned against the counter, gripping the cool granite. "He had to go on a very early work trip, sweetie. He'll be gone for a little while." "Oh," she absorbed this, seemingly satisfied. "Will he bring me a present?" The innocence was its own special kind of torture. "Maybe," I whispered, my throat tight. After I dropped her off, after I pasted on one last smile and waved as she skipped into her classroom, the facade crumbled. The silence in the car was a vacuum, sucking all the false cheer out of me. I didn't drive to the clinic. I called Sarah, the receptionist, my voice surprisingly steady. "Family emergency," I said. "I need a few days." She offered condolences, asked if everything was okay. I made a non-committal sound and hung up. I couldn't stitch up a parakeet right now. I could barely hold myself together. I drove home, to the empty, haunted house. I stood in the living room, and for the first time I truly looked at it, not as my home but as a crime scene. This was where the life I knew had been murdered. And I was the detective and the primary victim, all rolled into one. The investigation started not with the burner phone, that was evidence I couldn't bear to touch again, but with his laptop. He'd taken his work one, but his personal MacBook was on his desk in the study. My fingers hovered over the lid. This was a violation, but so was his affair. The rules were Ash, it was password protected. Our anniversary, of course. The desktop background was a picture of the three of us at the zoo. I felt sick. I opened his browser history. It was meticulously cleared, too meticulously. That in itself was a clue. The Daniel I knew had a browser history full of sports news and guitar tablatures. I opened his email, nothing in the inbox, nothing in sent, but there was a folder, labeled Tax Docs 2022. I clicked it, and I found them. The receipts, dozens of them, not just for La Belle Epoque, for hotels. The Marriott downtown, yes, but also a quaint bed and breakfast in Asheville, a luxury resort in Charleston, all within the last 6 months. All for weekends or nights when he was supposedly at industry conferences or working late. There were receipts for gifts, a necklace from a jeweler I didn't recognize, a receipt for a dozen roses delivered to an office address that wasn't his, a booking confirmation for a hot air balloon ride. He'd never taken me on a hot air balloon ride. We talked about it for years. It's so expensive, he'd always say. Maybe for our 15th anniversary. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely control the trackpad. I felt like I was going to vomit. This wasn't a seedy, guilt-ridden mistake. This was a full-blown, elaborate, and horrifyingly romantic courtship. He was wooing her, with our money, with the time that belonged to me and Chloe. I stumbled away from the desk, bile rising in my throat. I made it to the kitchen sink before I threw up, the acidic taste of betrayal burning my throat and nose. I clung to the counter, gasping, tears streaming down my face. I had to know what she looked like. This Jessica. This junior analyst who understood him so well. I went back to the laptop. My search was frantic, feverish. I went to his Instagram. He rarely used it. His profile was private, only 100 followers. Mostly family, old college friends. I scrolled through his followers. Nothing. Then I looked at who he was following. 30 accounts. Our local news, a few sports teams, some guitar players, and her. Jessica Lloyd, her profile was public. I clicked it and there she was. Young. Of course she was young, maybe 25. Long, honey blonde hair, a bright, easy smile. She was pretty in a generic sorority girl way. Her feed was a curated stream of brunches, rooftop bars, gym selfies, and sunsets. She looked fun, uncomplicated. The exact opposite of a wife and mother in her late 30s whose life involved vomit-covered scrubs and parent-teacher conferences. And then I saw it. A photo from 3 weeks ago. She was at a winery, holding a glass of white wine, laughing at something out of frame. The caption, "Weekend vibes with my love red number blessed," and the man's arm around her waist, his hand resting on her hip, his distinctive watch clearly visible, the expensive tag hewer I'd saved up for 6 months to buy him for our 10th anniversary. I made a sound, a low, wounded animal groan. It was one thing to know. It was another to see his arm around her, to see her call him my love, to see him wearing the watch I'd given him as a symbol of our decade together while he posed as her boyfriend. I slammed the laptop shut. I couldn't look anymore. The evidence was overwhelming. It was everywhere. It was in the financial records. It was on social media. It was in the glitter on his wrist. My marriage wasn't just over. It had been a sham for months, an elaborate puppet show where I was the only one who didn't know I was playing a part. The grief was suddenly eclipsed by a towering, incandescent rage. It rose up in me, hot and blinding. This wasn't just pain, this was fury. How dare he use our money? How dare he wear my gifts to seduce her? How dare he lie to my face, day after day, and then have the nerve to tell me he loved me? I stormed through the house, the rage needing an outlet. I went to his closet. I yanked open the doors. I started pulling everything out. His suits, his shirts, his stupid, expensive shoes. I threw them into a heap in the middle of the bedroom floor. I was breathing in ragged, furious gasps. I took the watch box from his dresser and threw it onto the pile. I was going to burn it all. I was going to take it to the backyard and set it on fire and watch our past, his lies, turn to ash. I was dragging the first armload of his clothes toward the stairs when my phone rang. It was his ringtone, the old one from before, the one I hadn't changed yet. I stopped. The pile of clothes slipped from my numb fingers. The rage evaporated as quickly as it had come, leaving me cold and hollow and exhausted. I couldn't burn his things. I couldn't have a dramatic, cathartic fire. That wasn't me. I was a veterinarian, a mother. I solved problems with calmness and care, not with gasoline. The phone kept ringing. A decision had to be made. I couldn't hide forever. The unraveling was happening, and I had to manage the fraying ends or everything would be lost in the chaos. I walked back to the kitchen, where my phone was charging. I looked at the screen. Daniel read the heart emoji was a sick joke. I didn't pick up, I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text came through. Please, Amelia, pick up. We need to talk about this like adults, for Chloe's sake. There it was again, our daughter, his shield. I stared at the text. The rage was gone, replaced by a cold, clear, and terrifying resolve. He was right about one thing. We did need to talk, but not like he thought. He wanted to talk to repair. I needed to talk to dismantle. My fingers, now steady, typed out a reply. It was the first message I'd sent him since my world ended. Meet me at the house. 5 p.m. Chloe will be at my mother's. We will talk. I hit send before I could lose my nerve. The performance was over. It was time for the confrontation, not a screaming match, not a tearful breakdown, a negotiation for the terms of my survival. The hook was no longer just embedded. It was being used to pull me toward a new, terrifying strength. I was broken, yes, but I was still standing, and I was finally ready to fight. The hours between my text and 5 p.m. were a strange, suspended reality. I moved through the house like a ghost, but a ghost with a purpose. The rage had burned itself out, leaving behind a cold, clear-eyed determination. I wasn't cleaning up, I was preparing a battlefield. I didn't touch the pile of his clothes. I left it there, a monument to my temporary insanity in the middle of our bedroom. Instead, I went to the kitchen and made a pot of coffee. Not for him, for me. I needed to be sharp, caffeinated, and utterly devoid of hysterics. I dressed in simple, dark jeans and a sweater, armor for the negotiation to come. At 4:30 p.m., my mother picked up Chloe. I'd called her, my voice miraculously steady, and told her a half-truth. Daniel and I are having some big issues. We need an evening alone to talk. Can you take her? My mother, God bless her, asked no questions. She just said, of course, sweetheart, I'm here. The kindness in her voice almost undid me. I hugged Chloe extra tight at the door. Be good for Grandma. I love you to the moon and back. I love you to Iceland and back, she chirped, repeating the new, painful phrase she'd picked up from me. I forced a smile and closed the door, leaning against it for a long moment after their car pulled away. The silence was back, heavy, expectant. At 4:58 p.m., a car pulled into the driveway, not his car. A rental, of course. I watched from the window as he got out. He was wearing different clothes, jeans, and a pullover, an outfit meant to look casual, approachable. He ran a hand through his hair, took a deep breath, and walked to the door. He looked like a man preparing for a difficult business meeting. The doorbell rang. The sound was absurdly formal. He was ringing the bell on his own house. I opened the door. We stood there, on either side of the threshold, staring at each other. The air between us crackled with everything unsaid. Amelia, he said, his voice soft. Daniel, I replied, my tone flat. I stepped back. Come in. He walked in, his eyes immediately scanning the room, looking for clues. They landed on the pile of his clothes visible from the hallway. He flinched but said nothing. I made coffee, I said, walking toward the kitchen, not waiting to see if he followed. I needed the structure of hostess rituals. Pouring. Adding cream. The mundane actions kept my hands from shaking. He followed me and stood awkwardly by the island. Thank you, he said as I slid a mug toward him. He didn't touch it. I leaned against the counter opposite him, holding my own mug. The steam warmed my face. We need to establish some ground rules, I began, my voice sounding strangely calm, like a narrator in a documentary about someone else's life. He nodded eager. Yes, rules, of course, whatever you need. First, I said, looking directly at him, you will not lie to me again, not once, not about anything. The truth, however ugly, is the only currency you have left with me. Do you understand? He swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. Yes. Second, this is not a negotiation about us. There is no us. This is a negotiation about the dissolution of our marriage and the co-parenting of our daughter. Those are the only items on the table. His face fell, the hope he'd been carrying extinguished. Amelia, please, don't say that. We have 11 years. We have a family. I made a terrible, terrible mistake. I will end it with her today. I will do anything. You ended it with me months ago, Daniel, I interrupted, my voice still quiet but laced with ice. You just forgot to tell me. You ended it when you booked the first hotel room. You ended it when you bought her roses. You ended it when you let her call you her love. This, I gestured between us, this is just the paperwork. He looked down at his hands. I don't want a divorce. I don't care what you want, I said, and the words were clean, sharp, and true. This is no longer about what you want. It's about what I need. And I need to not be married to a man who is in love with someone else. He was silent for a long moment. Is that what you think? He whispered. I don't think. I know. I saw your phone, Daniel. The other one, I read the messages. I saw the photos. I know about the hot air balloon ride, the one we were going to take for our 15th anniversary. My voice broke on the last sentence, the first crack in my armor. He paled. He looked truly horrified. You went through my things? A bitter laugh escaped me. You're standing in a house you paid for with a fair money, wearing clothes I washed while you were texting your girlfriend, and you're offended by a violation of privacy. Don't. Just don't. He sank onto a stool, his shoulders slumping in genuine defeat. The performance was over. This was the real man, caught, cornered, and finally out of lies. It got out of hand, he mumbled to the floor. No, I corrected him gently. You let it get out of hand. One decision at a time. Now, we need to talk about practicalities. You will stay in the rental. You will not come to this house unless I am aware of it, and it is for the purpose of seeing Chloe. We will tell her together in a few days with a therapist present that Daddy is going to be living somewhere else for a while. He nodded, not looking up. Okay. I will contact a lawyer tomorrow. I expect you to do the same. We will do this as fairly and cleanly as possible. For Chloe. Okay. And you will tell me the truth right now about one thing? I waited until he looked up at me. His eyes were red-rimmed. How long did you think you could keep this going? What was the end game? He held my gaze for a moment, then looked away, ashamed. I don't know, he admitted, his voice thick. I think I thought I could have both. I didn't want to lose you, or Chloe, I liked how she made me feel. Young, uncomplicated, it was an escape. I never meant for it to go this far. It was the first truly honest thing he'd said. It wasn't an excuse. It was a confession, and it was somehow more devastating than any lie. He'd risked our entire family, our entire life for a feeling, for an escape. I set my coffee down. I hadn't taken a sip. You need to go now? He stood up. Amelia, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. I believed him, and it didn't change a thing. I know you are, I said, but sorry doesn't put this back together. He walked to the door. He paused, his hand on the knob. I do love you, he said, without turning around. Maybe you do, I said to his back, but it wasn't enough, was it? He didn't reply. He opened the door and walked out into the twilight. I didn't watch him go. I turned and looked at our home, the home we'd built, the home he'd hollowed out. I walked to the pile of his clothes in the bedroom. I didn't feel rage anymore. I felt nothing. A vast, empty nothing. I started picking them up, not to burn them, but to box them. It was a practical task. It needed to be done. I found a stack of empty moving boxes in the garage. I brought them upstairs and began to fold his things methodically, mechanically. Each shirt, each pair of pants was a memory. This was the shirt he wore when we got engaged. These were the pajamas he wore on Christmas morning. I folded them all and placed them in the box, sealing away the ghost of the man I loved. When I was done, I pushed the boxes against the wall in his study. Out of the way, contained, I went to my jewelry box. I opened it and looked at my wedding ring. The diamond caught the light. I thought of the day he'd put it on my finger, his hands shaking. I thought of the vows we'd made. I'd meant every word. Slowly, I twisted the ring off my finger. It felt strange, the skin beneath it pale and indentated. It felt light. I held the ring in my palm for a long moment. It was just a piece of metal and stone. It had no power unless I gave it power. The meaning I had given it, love, commitment forever, was gone. It was just a thing. I didn't throw it away. I placed it back in the velvet box and closed the lid. I wasn't that woman anymore. The woman who wore that ring was gone. She died in a therapist's office, surrounded by the smell of sandalwood and lies. I was just Amelia now, a veterinarian, a mother. A woman standing alone in a quiet house with a stack of boxes and a future that was a terrifying blank page. The hook had pulled me through the worst of the pain, and now I was here on the other side of it, raw and scarred, but free. The division was complete. What came next was entirely up to me. The days after Daniel moved out folded into one another, a monotonous blur of gray. I functioned. I took Chloe to school, I picked her up, I made meals she barely touched. I went to work at the clinic, where the concerned looks from my colleagues felt like pinpricks. I performed spays and neuters, I diagnosed a parrot with a vitamin deficiency. I comforted a weeping elderly woman as we put her ancient dachshund to sleep. I was competent, I was professional. I was a ghost in my own body, going through the motions of a life that no longer felt like mine. The pain wasn't a sharp scream anymore. It was a constant, low-frequency hum, a background radiation of grief that poisoned everything. I'd forgotten what silence sounded like without it. I'd be scrubbing a pan or reading Chloe a bedtime story, and the memory would ambush me. His laugh, the way he'd always steal a bite of whatever I was cooking, the weight of his arm around me in sleep. The memories were no longer sweet. They were taunting, cruel echoes from a country I'd been exiled from. We told Chloe a week later, with a kind, soft-spoken therapist named Sarah in a room that smelled of Play-Doh and patience. We used careful, rehearsed words. Daddy is going to live in a different house for a while. We both love you more than anything in the whole world. This is not your fault. She'd looked from me to Daniel, her little brow furrowed. Are you mad at each other? Daniel had opened his mouth, but I'd spoken first, my voice soft but firm. We're sad, honey, and we're learning how to be better friends, but we will always, always be your mommy and daddy. She'd accepted it with the baffling resilience of children, her main concern being whether she could have 2 birthday parties. Daniel had cried, I had not. I was all cried out. I was a dry well. The nights were the worst. After Chloe was asleep, the house would groan and settle around me, every sound a potential intruder, every silence a judgment. I'd wander from room to room, a restless spirit. I'd ended up in his study, now just a room with a desk and a stack of boxes containing the artifacts of our life together. The Iceland brochure was on top of the desk, a stark, glacial landscape under the northern lights. A scream given form. It felt like a message from a past, more impulsive self. One Tuesday, the bottom found me. It was raining, a cold, relentless Carolina downpour that matched my internal weather. I'd had a difficult day at the clinic. A young golden retriever hit by a car. We'd fought for hours but lost him. The grief of the owners had mirrored my own, a reflection that was too sharp to bear. I came home, soaked and shivering, to find a letter from Daniel's lawyer. Formal, cold, outlining his rights and proposed parenting schedule. It referred to our daughter as the minor child. It reduced 11 years of life to a custody spreadsheet. I stood in the kitchen, the rain drumming on the roof, the lawyer's letter in my hand, the image of the dead golden retriever in my mind, and I broke. Not with sobs, but with a complete and total systems shutdown. I slid down the cabinet onto the floor, the cold tiles seeping through my clothes. I didn't cry. I just sat there empty. I had nothing left. No anger, no sadness, no hope, just a vast, echoing nothingness. This was it, the bottom. The place where the pain was so complete it became a kind of peace. A numb, hollow peace. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for the light to fade from the windows. Long enough for my legs to go numb. My phone buzzed on the floor beside me. It was a notification from a travel app. Your flight to Reykjavik departs in 72 hours. Check in now. I stared at the screen. Iceland, the impulsive, desperate scream. I'd completely forgotten about it. In the chaos of lawyers and therapists and explaining to a 6-year-old that her family was broken, I'd forgotten my own mad ticket out. A thought, clear and calm, surfaced in the numb void of my mind. Why not? What was left for me here tonight? A cold, empty house. A frozen dinner. The ghost of a marriage haunting every room. Chloe was with my mother for the night. The clinic could spare me. I had vacation time saved up for the family trip to Disney we were never going to take now. It wasn't a scream anymore. It was a decision. A simple, logistical decision. I would go. Not to run away from the pain, but because there was nothing left to run from. I had hit bottom. The only way left was up, or out. The numbness began to recede, replaced by a frantic, practical energy. I got up, my joints stiff. I went upstairs and dragged my suitcase, not the one I'd packed in a blind panic, but a smaller, sensible one from the closet. I packed warm clothes. I booked a rental car and a rustic cabin I found online, something remote with a view of mountains. I called my mother. "Mom, I need to go away for a few days." "Oh, honey, of course. Is it Daniel?" Her voice was laced with worry. "It's me," I said, and it was the truest thing I'd said in weeks. I need to remember who I am without all of this. Can you take Chloe?" "You know I can. Go, breathe, we'll be fine." 72 hours later, I was on a plane, watching the coastline of North Carolina disappear beneath the clouds. I felt no excitement, no fear, just a profound, weary curiosity. I was a scientist entering a new landscape, and the experiment was myself. Iceland was a world carved by fire and ice. It was raw, elemental, and brutally beautiful. It didn't care about my pain. The wind howled with an indifference that was strangely comforting. My little cabin was perched on a hillside overlooking a black sand beach. There was no Wi-Fi, no TV, just the sound of the wind and the distant crash of the Atlantic. The first day, I did nothing. I slept. I watched the light change over the mountains. I let the silence fill me up. It was a different silence from the one in my house. This one was vast and ancient, and it made my problems feel small, temporary. Geological time has a way of putting a broken heart into perspective. On the second day, the restlessness came. The silence began to feel like loneliness. I drove. I followed a dirt road that wound up into the highlands. I passed a sign, hand-painted, that said Hestelandeth Fox with an arrow horse farm. On an impulse, I turned. The farm was a cluster of low buildings against a dramatic backdrop of snow-capped volcanoes. The air smelled of hay, leather, and something wilder. Icelandic horses, small and shaggy, with thick manes and intelligent eyes, stood in a field, their coats every shade of brown, black, and gray. A woman with a weathered, kind face and hands that looked like they could fix anything came out of the barn. "Gothan Dajan," she said. "Can I help you?" Her English was accented but perfect. I don't know," I said, feeling foolish. "I was just driving by. Your horses are beautiful." "They are," she agreed, her eyes crinkling. "Tough, sure-footed, they have 2 extra gaits, very smooth. Would you like to see them?" I nodded. Her name was Eva. She showed me around, introducing me to the horses, telling me their names and personalities. There was one, a dapple-gray mare with a calm, steady gaze. Her name was Freyja. "She is very patient," Eva said. "A good listener." On another impulse, a mad one, I heard myself ask, "Do you give lessons?" Eva looked at me, really looked at me, as if she could see the fresh cracks running through me. "For you, yes, I think so, tomorrow morning. The light is best then." The next morning, I was back. Eva helped me into a helmet and led a saddled Freyja into a small, enclosed ring. The mountains stood sentinel around us. My heart was pounding. I hadn't been on a horse since I was a child at summer camp. "It is not about controlling her," Eva instructed, her hand on Freyja's neck. "It is about asking. It is a conversation. You must be clear. You must be confident. And you must listen to what she tells you." I put my foot in the stirrup and swung my leg over. The height was terrifying. The power of the animal beneath me was a palpable, living thing. I gripped the reins too tight. "Breathe," Eva said calmly. "Sit deep, tell her to walk." I clicked my tongue, the way I'd seen in movies. Freyja didn't move. She flicked an ear back, waiting. "You must ask with your body," Eva said. "Squeeze with your legs. Gently." I did, and Freyja began to walk. The movement was rolling, rhythmic. I bounced awkwardly at first, my body rigid with fear. I was a mess of clenched muscles. "Relax," Eva called out. "Let the movement find you. Listen to her." I took a deep breath of the cold, clean air. I forced my shoulders down. I loosened my death grip on the reins. I stopped trying to control and started trying to feel. The rhythm of her walk began to seep into my bones. Step, sway, it was meditative. My chaotic thoughts began to still, until there was nothing but the sound of Freyja's hooves on the soft earth, the smell of her, and the feeling of her muscles moving beneath me. Eva was right. It was a conversation. I asked with a shift of my weight, a gentle pressure from my calf. She answered with a change in direction, a softening of her pace. There was no lying, no pretense, no hidden text messages between us. It was pure, honest, non-verbal communication. It was the first real connection I'd felt with another living thing in months. We walked for what felt like both an eternity and no time at all. The cold air stung my cheeks, but I was warm from the inside out. And then, as we turned a corner in the ring, the weak winter sun broke through the clouds, illuminating the frost on the ground, making it look like a field of diamonds. And I felt it, a flicker, a tiny, fragile but undeniable spark of something that wasn't pain. It wasn't happiness, not yet. It was possibility. It was the simple, profound joy of a body working in sync with another creature. It was the realization that I could still learn. I could still feel something new. Tears welled in my eyes, but they weren't tears of grief. They were tears of release, of gratitude, for Freyja, for Eva, for the stubborn, indifferent beauty of Iceland, for the part of me that had bought a crazy ticket and gotten on a plane. I was at the bottom, and at the bottom I had found a horse. And on the back of that horse, I had found the faintest, most essential glimmer of my way back up. Returning to North Carolina was like stepping back into a faded photograph. The colors were duller, the air heavier, the world muffled. The sharp, elemental clarity of Iceland felt like a dream. The first breath I took back in my own house was a lungful of stale air and memory. But something was different, not in the house. In me, the tiny, fragile spark I'd found on Freyja's back had survived the flight home. It was a pilot light, small but stubborn, in the cold furnace of my heart. The chaos wasn't over. The lawyer calls continued. The parenting schedule was a logistical nightmare that required a color-coded spreadsheet. Daniel's presence was a ghost in the machine of my life, a constant, low-level irritant. He'd text about pickup times, and I'd see his name and feel the old, familiar lurch of pain. But it was fainter now, muffled. The raw, exposed nerve was beginning to callous over. The real challenge wasn't managing him, it was managing the emptiness he'd left behind. The silence in the house when Chloe was with him was a physical presence. It was in those hours, the ones that used to be filled with the mundane rhythm of a shared life, cooking together, debating what to watch, the sound of him playing guitar in the other room, that the grief threatened to swallow me whole. I couldn't go back to Iceland, but I could bring a piece of Iceland back to me. The thought came to me one Tuesday evening, standing in the middle of my too-quiet kitchen. The memory of that feeling, the rhythm of the horse, the focus it required, the honest, uncomplicated connection was a lifeline. I didn't want to just remember it. I needed to feel it again. I got on my laptop, my fingers trembling slightly, not with sadness, but with a new, tentative purpose. I searched for horseback riding lessons near Charlotte. The results populated. Fancy show-jumping barns, trail riding outfits for tourists, and then, one listing, Serenity Creek Stables, therapeutic and recreational riding. The website was simple, no flashy graphics. Photos of calm-looking horses and people of all ages, some with visible disabilities, some who just looked like they needed a quiet place to be. It felt right. It felt like the opposite of the performative, competitive world Daniel had always thrived in. I sent an email before I could lose my nerve. 2 days later, I was driving down a long, gravel road lined with pine trees, the air smelling of sap and earth. Serenity Creek was nothing like Eva's dramatic Icelandic farm. It was humble, a little worn at the edges, but peaceful. The sounds were the same, the soft snuffling of horses, the creak of leather, the gentle cooing of pigeons in the rafters. My instructor was a woman named Brenda, who had the same steady, capable energy as Eva. Her horse was a gentle, sway-backed old Appaloosa named Patches. "He's seen it all," Brenda said, patting his neck. "He's not impressed by much. He's a good place to start." And so it began. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, after I dropped Chloe at her dad's for his midweek dinner, I drove to the stables. It became my ritual, my sanctuary. The first few lessons were frustrating. Patches was patient, but I was stiff, awkward, trying to force it. I'd get off the horse feeling sore and discouraged, my mind still buzzing with legal worries and grocery lists. "You're trying to drive him like a car," Brenda said one evening, not unkindly. "It's a partnership. You have to breathe, you have to be present, whatever's going on out there." She gestured beyond the pine trees to the world of divorce papers and lonely dinners. "It stays out there. In here, it's just you and Patches. Now try again, and this time breathe." I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the sweet smell of hay and horse. I let the worries go. The argument with Daniel about summer vacation. The scary-looking bill from my lawyer. The fear that I'd be alone forever. I pictured them as physical things, setting them down on the fence post outside the ring. I opened my eyes. I squeezed with my legs. Patches began to walk. And this time, I listened. I felt the rhythm of his walk and I moved with it, not against it. I stopped thinking and started feeling. The tension melted from my shoulders, my hands, my jaw. It was a small thing, a walk. But in that moment, it was everything. It was a complete, total absorption in a single physical act. There was no room for grief, for anxiety, for fear. There was only the next step, the next breath, the next subtle shift of weight. It was the first time in months my mind had been truly, utterly quiet. The habit began to form. Not just the act of writing, but the state of mind it required. I started to find moments of that same focused peace elsewhere. While brushing Patches down after a lesson, the repetitive motion of the currycomb, the feel of his warm, solid side beneath my hand, was a meditation. While mucking out a stall, a chore I'd started volunteering for, the simple, physical labor was cathartic. It was honest work with an immediate, visible result. The transformation wasn't dramatic. It was incremental, almost invisible. But I felt it. I felt it one Saturday at the grocery store. I ran into Daniel. He was with her, Jessica. They were in the produce section looking at avocados. He was making her laugh. She was young and pretty, and she looked at him with adoring eyes. The sight was a physical blow, a sucker punch to the gut that stole my breath. The old pain, the old rage, surged up, hot and acidic. I wanted to throw something. I wanted to scream. I wanted to march over there and what? And then I heard Brenda's voice in my head. Breathe. Whatever's going on out there, it stays out there. I took a deep breath. I looked at them, not as the man who betrayed me and the woman who destroyed my life, but as two people. Just two people buying avocados. Their happiness had nothing to do with me. My pain was my own to manage. I turned my cart around. I didn't flee, I just moved on. I went to the dairy aisle. My heart was still pounding, but I was steady. I had not given him the power to ruin my day. It was a small victory. It felt enormous. I felt it when I was with Chloe. I was more present with her. The constant background hum of my own misery had softened, allowing me to truly hear her stories about school, to be silly with her, to just enjoy the weight of her head on my shoulder during movie night. I wasn't just going through the motions anymore. I was there. The writing, the habit of it, was teaching me a new language, a language of patience, of listening, of partnership that wasn't about control, but about mutual respect. It was teaching me how to be alone without being lonely, how to be quiet without being sad. One Thursday evening, as I was putting Patches back in his paddock, Brenda leaned against the fence, watching me. "You're looking good out there," she said. "Stronger." "Thanks to you," I said, latching the gate, "and to him." I gave Patches a fond pat on the neck. "It's all you, honey," she said with a smile. "We just provided the horse. The work, that's always yours to do." I drove home that night as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The old dread of returning to an empty house was gone. The house wasn't empty. It was my house. It was filled with my things, my daughter's drawings on the fridge, my books on the shelf. I walked in, my boots still dusty from the arena, the smell of horse and fresh air clinging to my clothes. It was a good smell, an honest smell. I made a cup of tea and sat on the back porch, watching the fireflies blink in the gathering dusk. The grief was still there. I knew it would always be a part of me, a scar on my heart. But it was no longer a wound that defined me. It was just a story my body remembered. The hook that had once been embedded in my heart, pulling me through the sharpest agony, had dissolved. In its place was something I was building for myself, day by day, lesson by lesson, breath by breath. It wasn't a new relationship. It wasn't a reconciliation. It was a habit, the habit of healing. And for the first time since the world ended, it felt like enough. The change crept up on me, not with a fanfare, but with a series of quiet realizations. It was in the way my body no longer ached after a lesson with Patches. It was in the way I could now effortlessly sync my movements with his, moving from a walk to a trot with nothing more than a thought and a subtle shift of my weight. The frustration was gone, replaced by a fluid, wordless conversation. Brenda had started me on a new horse, a more sensitive chestnut gelding named Rusty who required finesse, not force. I was no longer learning to ride, I was learning to speak horse. One crisp Saturday morning, Brenda met me at the gate with a different look in her eye. "Patches and Rusty have the day off," she said, a sly smile playing on her lips. "You're with me today." She led me not to the familiar training arena, but to a trailhead at the edge of the property that wound up into the blue-tinged Appalachian foothills. Tied there were two sturdy trail horses, their saddlebags packed with water and apples. "We're going for a real ride," she declared, handing me the reins of a steady-looking bay mare. "Time to see what you've got." A thrill of nerves, sharp and clean, shot through me. This was different. This wasn't the controlled safety of the ring. This was the wild, unpredictable unknown. The trail was narrow, rocky in places, climbing steadily through dense stands of pine and oak. The only sounds were the creak of our saddles, the snort of the horses, and the distant cry of a hawk. For the first half hour, I was tense, my senses on high alert, my hands too tight on the reins. Every rustle in the underbrush made me jump. I was waiting for something to go wrong. Brenda, riding ahead, glanced back. "Breathe, Amelia. She knows the trail better than you do. Trust her. Let her do her job." I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of pine needles and damp earth. I forced my shoulders to relax. I loosened my grip, giving the mare her head. And just like that, the rhythm found us. She picked her way sure-footedly over roots and rocks, her ears flicking back and forth, listening to my cues and reading the trail with an ancient intelligence. I began to trust her. I began to trust myself. We broke through the tree line near the summit, and the world fell away below us. The view was a breathtaking panorama of rolling green hills and valleys, the roof of our stable a tiny speck in the distance. The sky was a vast, endless blue. Brenda reined in her horse and I pulled up beside her. We sat in silence for a long moment, just breathing it in. "You see," Brenda said, her voice quiet, "it's all about perspective. The problem's down there." She nodded toward the world below. "They look a lot smaller from up here, don't they?" They did. The lawyer's letters, the parenting schedule, the memory of Daniel's face, it all seemed to shrink, put into its proper place by the immense, timeless scale of the mountains. I wasn't just a betrayed wife up here. I was a woman on a horse on a mountain, and that felt like more than enough. The descent was easier. I was no longer a passenger, I was a partner. I guided the mare, talked to her softly, felt her powerful body respond to mine. When we finally rode back into the stable yard, my muscles were tired but singing with a healthy fatigue. I felt capable, powerful in a way that had nothing to do with dominance over anyone else and everything to do with competence within myself. That ride became our new ritual. Every Saturday, we explored a new trail. With each outing, my confidence grew, not just in the saddle, but in my bones. I was learning to navigate difficult terrain, to expect the unexpected, to trust my own judgment, and the creature I was partnered with. The skills were translating. I felt it at work. A difficult client was yelling about a bill, her voice shrill and demanding. The old me would have apologized profusely, my shoulders hunched, trying to make myself small. The new me took a deep breath, just like I did on the trail. I stood up straight, looked her in the eye, and spoke in a calm, steady voice I hardly recognized as my own. "I understand you're upset. Let's look at the breakdown together and see what we can do." I wasn't being aggressive, I was being assertive. The client calmed down, we resolved it. I felt it with Daniel. He'd started testing the boundaries again, showing up 10 minutes early for pickup, trying to make small talk, his tone laced with a new, curious respect. The old me would have either shrunk from him or exploded. The new me simply held the door open, my posture relaxed but firm. "Chloe's just finishing her snack. We'll see you at the agreed time." I didn't engage, I didn't plead. I held my line, and he backed down. The biggest test came on a Tuesday evening. I was mucking out Patch's stall, lost in the simple, satisfying rhythm of the work, pitchfork, heave, shake, when my phone buzzed in my back pocket. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Hi, Amelia. This is Jessica, Daniel's friend. I know this is weird, but I was hoping we could talk." The pitchfork clattered to the concrete floor. My heart hammered against my ribs. Jessica, the name was a slap. The ghost from the grocery store, from the Instagram feed, from the burner phone messages, was reaching out from the ether to touch me. My first instinct was pure, unadulterated panic. Then rage. How dare she? What could she possibly want? To rub it in? To ask for my blessing? I leaned against the stable wall, the rough wood solid against my back. I could smell Patches, hear his quiet munching on hay in the next stall. This was my sanctuary. She didn't get to invade this. My fingers itched to type out a furious reply, to tell her exactly what I thought of her, to unleash all the pain her actions had caused. But I didn't. I heard Brenda's voice. Breathe. It's all about perspective. I thought about the mountain trail. When you encountered a fallen log or a washed-out path, you didn't charge at it blindly. You stopped. You assessed. You found a way around. I picked up the pitchfork. I finished mucking out the stall, the physical labor grounding me, giving the initial storm of emotion time to pass. I put Patches back in, gave him a good night pat, and then I picked up my phone. I didn't type a reply. I called the number. She answered on the second ring, her voice hesitant, young. Hello? Jessica, it's Amelia. My voice was calm, steady, the voice of a woman who rode horses up mountains. There was a stunned silence on the other end. She clearly hadn't expected a call. Oh, hi, I wasn't sure you'd. What can I do for you? I asked, my tone neutral, neither friendly nor hostile, professional, like she was a client. She took a shaky breath. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I didn't know, I knew he was married, but he said it was over, that you were just, I don't know, roommates. Staying for the kid, I believed him. I saw the pictures of your family on his desk and I felt sick. I ended it with him a week ago. I listened. I didn't interrupt. I didn't offer absolution. I just let her talk. Her words weren't a balm, they were just more data. More pieces of the puzzle that was Daniel's deception. I guess I just wanted you to know that, she finished, her voice small, and that I'm sorry for my part in it. I looked out at the peaceful stable yard, at the sunset painting the sky in pastels. The anger was gone. All I felt was a distant pity for her. She was just another one of his victims, in a way. Another person he'd lied to. Thank you for telling me, I said, my voice even. I appreciate the call. There was another long pause. She was waiting for more, for anger, for forgiveness, for something. I gave her nothing but my steady silence. Okay, she said finally, her voice deflated. Well, bye. Goodbye, Jessica, I hung up. I stood there for a long moment, the phone in my hand. I expected to feel something: triumph, vindication, sadness, but I felt nothing. Her apology changed nothing. It didn't rewrite the past. It didn't heal my wounds. My healing wasn't coming from her or from Daniel. It was coming from me. From the steady, reliable rhythm of my own life. From the horses, from the mountains. The confrontation I'd always dreaded had happened. And I had navigated it. I hadn't gotten thrown. I'd kept my seat. I'd held the reins. I put my phone away. I finished my chores. As I walked to my car, the last of the sun warming my face, I realized the most important thing I had mastered wasn't writing. It was myself. The broken, reactive woman from the therapy couch was gone. In her place was someone steadier. Someone who could navigate rocky terrain without falling apart. Someone who could look out from the summit of her own life, and finally like the view. The confidence I'd found on horseback began to seep into the cracks of my everyday life. I started saying no. I said no to a client who wanted me to work an unscheduled emergency shift. I said no to my mother's well-intentioned but exhausting attempts to set me up with her friend's recently divorced son. I said no to Daniel when he asked, with a hopeful note in his voice, if I wanted to join him and Chloe for a movie, as a family. The word felt good in my mouth. Solid, a boundary I could build with. My world, which had once been so terrifyingly small and empty, was beginning to feel like my own. It was a quiet world, but it was peaceful. I had my daughter, my job, my horses. It was enough. More than enough. It was a life I had built myself, plank by painful plank, and I was proud of it. The idea to go hiking was an extension of this new confidence. The trails around Serenity Creek were gentle, winding through woods and along a creek. I'd started taking short walks there on Sundays, enjoying the solitude, the simple act of putting one foot in front of the other on a path that was clearly marked. It was a different kind of peace from the horses, a quieter, more solitary meditation. One Sunday, I decided to be ambitious. I drove an hour west to South Mountain State Park, lured by a park brochure's promise of a waterfall. The trail was listed as moderate. I had new hiking boots, a backpack with water and snacks, and a stubborn determination to prove I could do things on my own. The trail was steeper than I'd anticipated. The moderate rating felt like a lie concocted by masochistic park rangers. Within 20 minutes, my lungs were burning, and my new boots were already rubbing a hot spot on my heel. But the forest was beautiful, deep and green, smelling of damp earth and decay. I pushed on, my focus narrowing to the next step, the next rock, the next bend in the path. I was so focused on my feet, on my breathing, that I didn't see the route. My boot caught, and my ankle twisted sideways with a sickening, painful wrench. I cried out, stumbling forward, grabbing a tree to keep from falling. A sharp, bright pain shot up my leg. I leaned against the rough bark, breathing hard, my eyes squeezed shut. "Shit," I whispered to the empty forest. "Shit, shit, shit." I tried to put weight on it. A fresh bolt of pain made me gasp. This was bad. I was alone, on a trail that was clearly less traveled than the main one, and I was at least a mile from the parking lot. Panic, cold and familiar, began to prickle at the edges of my mind. This was how people ended up on the news. Divorced veterinarian vanishes on solo hike. I fumbled for my phone, no service, of course. I took a deep breath, forcing the panic down. Breathe, assess. I was a doctor, for God's sake. Just for animals, but the principles were the same. I carefully lowered myself to the ground, my back against the tree. I pulled up my pant leg. My ankle was already starting to swell. It wasn't grotesque, but it was definitely a sprain. I wasn't walking out on it. I had two options: sit here and hope another hiker came by, or try to crawl/hop back to the main trail. Both options were humiliating and fraught with danger. I felt the first hot tear of self-pity trace a path through the dirt on my cheek. So much for independence. That's when I heard it. The crunch of footsteps on the path ahead, coming from the direction of the waterfall. Not the light, quick steps of a trail runner, but the steady, purposeful tread of someone who knew where they were going. My heart leapt. "Hello," I called out, my voice shaky. "Hello, I need help." The footsteps quickened. A moment later, a man came around the bend. He was tall, dressed in practical hiking clothes that looked well-used, a daypack on his back. He had a kind, weathered face, eyes that crinkled at the corners, and a short, scruffy beard that was peppered with gray. He wasn't movie star handsome, he looked real, solid, like the trees around us. "Whoa there," he said, his voice a calm, low rumble that immediately soothed my frayed nerves. He dropped to a crouch a few feet away, his eyes scanning me, assessing the situation with a practiced ease. "What's the trouble?" "I twisted my ankle," I said, gesturing weakly. "I think it's a sprain. I can't put any weight on it." "Okay, easy does it," he said, his tone reassuring. He didn't touch me, didn't crowd me. He just stayed in his crouch, a respectful distance away. "Let's take a look. Mind if I shook my head. He moved closer, his movements careful and deliberate. He examined my ankle with a gentle, professional touch. His hands were capable, calloused. "Yeah, that's swelling up nice and good," he said, not unkindly. "Doesn't look broken, but it's a decent sprain. I'm Ben, by the way, I'm a guide here. You picked a rough spot to take a tumble." "Amelia," I managed. And believe me, I wasn't trying to. He smiled, a warm, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Never do. I've got a first aid kit. Let's get this stabilized, and then we'll figure out how to get you back to civilization." He worked with a quiet competence that was mesmerizing. He pulled an elastic bandage and a cold pack from his pack. He wrapped my ankle with a firm, secure pressure that offered immediate relief. The whole time, he kept up a steady, calm stream of chatter. "Seen a lot worse out here. Last month, a guy tried to propose to his girlfriend at the waterfall, dropped the ring, and then fell in trying to fish it out. She said yes anyway. Guess it was a memorable one." I let out a weak laugh, the sound strange in the quiet woods. "That's one way to do it. Right, this is a walk in the park compared to that." He finished tying the bandage and sat back on his heels. "All right, Dr. Amelia. Prognosis is you're not walking out of here. Options are: I can run back to the trailhead and get a ranger, which'll take about an hour. Or, if you're okay with it, I can give you a piggyback ride to the main trail. It's about a quarter mile. My truck is there. I can drive you to your car." The thought of being carried by a complete stranger was mortifying, but the thought of sitting alone in the woods for an hour, with the pain in my ankle throbbing in time with my rising fear, was worse. Piggyback, I said, my face flushing. Please, I'm so sorry. Don't be, he said easily. Part of the job, well, not officially. The park service doesn't list human taxi in the brochure, but I like to go above and beyond. He turned around and knelt. All right, climb aboard. Just try not to strangle me. It was undignified and awkward. I looped my arms around his neck, and he hooked his arms under my knees, standing up with a soft grunt of effort. He was strong, his back broad and steady against my chest. I was intensely aware of the scent of him, clean sweat, sunscreen, and the faint, pleasant smell of pine. He started walking, his pace steady and sure. I kept my eyes fixed on the path ahead, too embarrassed to speak. So, Amelia, he said, his voice a little breathless from the effort. What brings you out to the South Mountains all by your lonesome? It was a simple question, but it felt loaded. The truth, I'm recently divorced and trying to remember how to be a person, was too much to dump on a man who was currently carrying me. Just needed some air, I said, which was both true and a massive understatement. Best place for it, he replied, and I could hear the smile in his voice. He didn't push. He just carried me, his breathing even, his steps careful on the uneven ground. We reached the main trailhead sooner than I expected. His truck was an old, beat-up Ford, its bed filled with climbing ropes, backpacks, and a well-chewed tennis ball. It looked lived-in, honest. He gently set me down on the tailgate. Thank you, I said, meaning it more than I could express. Really, you saved me. All in a day's work, he said with a shrug, though his eyes were kind. He drove me the short distance to my car, then helped me into the driver's seat. You got someone you can call. To help you get home? I'll be okay, I said, though the thought of navigating the stairs to my apartment alone was daunting. He looked skeptical but didn't argue. He handed me a business card from his glove box. It was simple, just his name, Ben Carter, and a number. Wilderness guide and outdoor instructor. If you need anything, he said, or if the ankle gets worse, I'm pretty handy in a pinch. I took the card, my fingers brushing his. Thank you, Ben. He tipped his hat, a gesture that was charmingly old-fashioned. Take care of yourself, Amelia. Maybe stick to the horse trails for a bit. He'd noticed my stable clothes. He waved and walked back to his truck. I sat in my car for a long time, watching him drive away, the business card held tight in my hand. The pain in my ankle was a dull, persistent ache. But for the first time since Daniel left, the ache of loneliness was gone. It had been replaced by something else. Something warm. Something that felt suspiciously like the memory of a strong, steady back and a low, rumbling voice in a quiet wood. It was just a chance encounter. A kindness from a stranger. But it felt like a signpost on a trail I hadn't even known I was on. The next morning, my ankle was a spectacular palette of purple and blue, a throbbing reminder of my stupidity and my rescue. Hobbling around my apartment, making coffee on one foot, I felt the familiar pull of self-reliance war with a new, unfamiliar urge. Ben's business card sat on the kitchen counter, a simple rectangle of cardstock that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. If you need anything. Did I need anything? I had cruths from a past sports injury of Chloe's buried in a closet. I could manage, I was good at managing. I was the queen of managing. Managing a broken heart, a demanding job, a confused child, and now, a sprained ankle. Adding a handsome stranger to that list felt like tempting fate. Or worse, like being weak. But then I thought of his calmness in the woods, the lack of pity in his eyes. He hadn't seen a damsel in distress, he'd seen a logistical problem to be solved. I liked that. It felt respectful. I picked up my phone, my thumb hovered over his number. Just a thank you, I told myself, be polite, that's all. I typed a message, deleted it, typed another. Finally, I settled on something simple and direct. Hi Ben, it's Amelia from the trail yesterday. Thank you again for your help. The ankle is colorful, but I'm managing. Hope you have a good day. I hit send before I could overthink it and immediately threw my phone onto the couch as if it were hot. I hopped to the sink, busying myself with washing a single coffee mug, my heart doing a ridiculous little tap dance against my ribs. I was so engrossed in my fake busyness that I jumped when the phone buzzed a minute later. Colorful is good, means it's healing. Glad you're okay. Let me know if managing gets old. I make a mean grilled cheese and I'm an expert at changing hard-to-reach light bulbs. A laugh burst out of me, unexpected and bright in the quiet apartment. A grilled cheese, not flowers, not a dramatic declaration. A grilled cheese. It was the most undeniably normal thing anyone had offered me in a year. I didn't write back immediately. I let the offer sit. I used the crutches to get to the clinic for a half day, where I was fussed over by my staff and had to explain my clumsiness to a chorus of sympathetic oohs and ahs. The entire time, the text was in the back of my mind, a little glowing ember of something. Possibility. That evening, after I'd wrestled Chloe into bed and collapsed onto the couch, my ankle throbbing in time with my heartbeat, I looked at the text again. Managing gets old. It had. It really, really had. I typed back, my fingers feeling clumsy. A grilled cheese does sound superior to my frozen pizza, and my hallway light has been out for a month. His reply was almost instantaneous. Name the time. I'll bring the cheese and the bravery. And so, 2 days later, Ben came over. It wasn't a date. It was a grilled cheese mission. He arrived exactly on time, holding a paper bag from a local grocer in one hand and a box of light bulbs in the other. He was wearing a simple flannel shirt and jeans, and he looked comfortable, in his own skin, in my doorway. "The cavalry has arrived," he announced with a small, easy smile. Chloe, who had been intensely curious about the man who'd saved Mommy from the woods, peered at him from behind my legs. "Do you really know how to fix lights?" she asked, skeptical. "I do," Ben said solemnly, kneeling down to her level, which immediately won me over. "It's a secret power, alongside my grilled cheese expertise." He proceeded to spend the next 20 minutes with Chloe, having her hand him tools, the Phillips head, "Ma'am, if you please," and hold the flashlight, "Aim it right there, Chief," while he changed the hall light. He talked to her like she was a fellow engineer, not a little kid. She was utterly enthralled. Then he moved to the kitchen and made grilled cheeses. But they weren't just grilled cheeses. They were masterpieces of crispy, buttery bread with a mix of fancy cheeses and a hint of apple slices inside. He made one for Chloe shaped like a dinosaur. She looked at him as if he'd just descended from Mount Olympus. We ate at the kitchen table. It wasn't awkward. He asked Chloe about school, he asked me about the clinic, he told funny, self-deprecating stories about his own guiding mishaps. He didn't ask about Daniel. He didn't tiptoe around the fact that I was divorced. He just accepted the landscape of my life as it was and chose to focus on the parts that were working. After dinner, he helped me with the dishes. Our hands brushed in the soapy water, and a simple, electric jolt went through me. It was so startling, so unfamiliar that I almost dropped a plate. I glanced at him. He was looking at me, his expression unreadable. He'd felt it too. He didn't try to stay. He didn't make a move. He just finished drying the last pan, put it away, and said he should probably head out. Chloe gave him a hug goodbye, which shocked me speechless. At the door, he paused. "The offer for the piggyback ride still stands if that hallway light goes out again," he said, his eyes crinkling. "I'll keep that in mind," I said, my face feeling warm. He left. The house felt different. It didn't feel empty. It felt quiet, peaceful. The ghost of Daniel, which had lingered in the corners, felt fainter, as if Ben's easy, solid presence had aired the place out. A week later, I texted him, "I'm off the crutches. To celebrate, I'm attempting to visit a coffee shop. Might need a guide to prevent further injury." He wrote back, "I know a place. They have a bean from Guatemala that will change your life. Pick you up at 10? And so it began. Our not dates. We started with coffee. Then a walk through a botanical garden where he knew the name of every plant. Then a visit to an animal shelter where he volunteered every other weekend, a fact that made something deep in my veterinarian soul sigh with approval. He wasn't trying to impress me, he was just sharing the things he loved. I learned about him in fragments. He was an Army veteran who'd found peace in the mountains after years of chaos. He'd never been married. He loved bad puns, classic rock, and stargazing. He was comfortable with silence. He could sit with me on a park bench for 20 minutes without feeling the need to fill the space with chatter. It was a revelation. I found myself talking to him in a way I hadn't talked to anyone in years. I told him about the panic of vet school finals. I told him about the time Chloe, as a toddler, had painted the cat with yogurt. I even, one evening under a sky dense with stars, told him about finding the glitter on Daniel's wrist. I didn't cry. I just stated it, a fact of my history. He listened. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He just took my hand, his grip warm and sure, and said, "That's a hell of a thing to go through." His quiet acknowledgement was more validating than any sympathy. It was delicate, this new thing, fragile as a bird's egg. I was terrified of breaking it. I was still Amelia, the woman who had been broken. The ghost of Daniel's betrayal lingered, a whisper of doubt. It's too soon. You're not ready. He'll see how damaged you are and run. But when I was with Ben, those voices grew quieter. He didn't see me as damaged. He saw me as Amelia, the woman who was a good mom, a capable vet, a person who was learning to ride horses and hike trails, however clumsily. One Saturday, he took me to his favorite spot, a rocky overlook that required a short, easy climb. He went first, then turned and offered me his hand to help me up the last step. I took it, and he pulled me up effortlessly. The city was spread out below us, tiny and insignificant. "Pretty great, right?" he said, his hand still holding mine. "It is," I breathed. He turned to face me, his expression serious for once. "Amelia," he said, his voice quiet. "I really like you. I know you've been through hell, and I'm not asking for anything. I need you to know that." I looked at him, at his kind, earnest face outlined against the vast sky. The ghost of Daniel screamed its warning. But for the first time, I didn't listen. I listened to the feeling of his hand in mine. I listened to the steady, reliable beat of my own heart. "I really like you too, Ben," I said, the words feeling true and right and terrifying. He smiled, a slow, beautiful smile that lit up his whole face. He didn't kiss me. He just squeezed my hand and said, "Good." We sat on the rock for a long time, watching the hawks circle below us, our shoulders touching. It wasn't a dramatic declaration. It wasn't the start of a whirlwind romance. It was just a quiet agreement between two adults who had found each other on an unplanned path. It was a beginning, delicate, uncertain, and more beautiful than anything I had dared to imagine for myself. The rhythm of my life had a new beat. The steady, reliable tempo of work and motherhood was now syncopated by the bright, unexpected notes of Ben. Our not dates became a regular, cherished part of my week. We didn't go to fancy restaurants. We went to used bookstores where he'd find obscure field guides for me and dog-eared sci-fi novels for himself. We went to a driving range where I discovered his army-straight posture translated into a terrible, hilarious golf swing that made him laugh at himself until he cried. We cooked together in my kitchen, a dance around each other that was becoming familiar. Comfortable, it was easy. That was the most startling thing. After the exhausting emotional acrobatics of my marriage, the constant deciphering of Daniel's moods and lies. Being with Ben was like coming up for air. He was transparent. What you saw was what you got. If he was annoyed, he'd sigh and run a hand through his hair. If he was happy, he'd smile, a full, unreserved smile that reached his eyes. There was no subtext, no hidden agenda. It was terrifying in its simplicity. I found myself waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the charming facade to crack and reveal some dark, hidden flaw. The ghost of Daniel's betrayal was a tenacious specter, whispering doubts in my ear. "He's too good to be true. You're not seeing the real him. He'll change." One Friday, Ben suggested a camping trip. Just one night, up near Linville Gorge. The stars are incredible there this time of year. I've got all the gear, you just need to show up. A night, alone in the woods, away from the safety of public spaces and predetermined end times. The invitation felt like a threshold. My heart did a nervous flutter. The ghost screamed a warning. Too fast, too isolated. What if I silenced it? I looked at Ben's face, open and hopeful. This was who he was. The outdoors was his church, and he was inviting me into it. I couldn't judge him by Daniel's metric. "I'd love to," I said, and the words felt like a leap of faith. Chloe stayed with my mother, who gave me a knowing, approving look that made me blush. I packed a bag, my stomach a knot of nerves and excitement. Ben picked me up in his beat-up truck, the back filled with neatly organized gear. He drove us west, the city skyline shrinking in the rearview mirror, replaced by the rolling, forested hills of the Piedmont, giving way to the older, grander Blue Ridge Mountains. He played classic rock on the radio, singing along off-key, his hand resting comfortably on my knee. The knot in my stomach began to loosen. We hiked a short, easy trail to a secluded overlook he knew. He set up the tent with an efficient, practiced ease that was mesmerizing to watch. I gathered firewood, feeling useful, feeling capable in this element that was so uniquely his. As the sun dipped below the ridge, painting the sky in fiery shades of orange and purple, he got a small campfire going. The flames crackled, pushing back the encroaching darkness. The air grew cold, sharp, and clean. He handed me a steaming mug of hot chocolate he'd made on a tiny camp stove, laced with a splash of peppermint schnapps from a flask in his pack. For medicinal purposes, he said with a wink, warms the core. We sat on a log, shoulders touching for warmth, watching the stars emerge one by one in the vast, inky blackness above us. There were no city lights to dim them here. The Milky Way was a luminous, breathtaking smear across the heavens. It's unbelievable, I whispered, feeling small and insignificant in the best possible way. Isn't it? He said, his voice quiet with reverence. Puts things in perspective. All our problems, they're so small under all this. We sat in a comfortable silence for a long time, sipping our hot chocolate, listening to the pop of the fire and the distant call of an owl. Can I ask you something? He said eventually, his voice soft. You don't have to answer. I nodded, my throat suddenly tight. This was it, the question about Daniel, the one I'd been waiting for. What was it that finally made you know? He asked. That you had to leave? It wasn't the question I expected. He wasn't asking for salacious details. He was asking for the turning point, the moment of clarity. I took a deep breath, the cold air stinging my lungs. I looked into the fire, seeing not flames, but a therapist's office, a smudge of pink glitter. It was in therapy, I began, my voice low, the therapy he'd suggested to fix our growing distance. I told him about the couch, the sandalwood smell, the performance Daniel was putting on, and I told him about the glitter, the charge on the credit card. The moment the pieces clicked together with silent, devastating finality. It was the sheer effort of it all, I said, the memory still sharp enough to bring a pang. The second phone, the lies stacked on top of lies, the romantic dinners. I realized the man I was married to wasn't just having a fling. He was capable of constructing an entire second life, with a different woman, while sitting across from me at dinner every night. The man I thought I knew, he didn't exist. The real him was the one who could do that, and I couldn't share a home, a life, a daughter with that man anymore. I fell silent, waiting for his pity, his outrage, but he just listened, his gaze fixed on the fire, his expression thoughtful. I'm sorry, he said after a moment, not because I think you're broken, but because that's a hell of a thing to have to see, to have your vision of someone just shatter like that. His understanding was a balm. He didn't try to fix it. He just acknowledged the weight of it. What about you? I asked, needing to shift the focus. Army to mountain guide, that's a shift. He poked the fire with a stick, sending up a shower of sparks. Yeah, it is. I joined young, wanted structure, purpose, and I found it, but I also found a lot of noise, a lot of chaos. When I got out, the world felt too loud, too complicated. The mountains, it's the only place that's ever been quiet enough for me to hear myself think. He looked at me. Out here, things are simple. You need shelter, water, food, you respect the weather. You watch out for the person next to you. There's no lying out here. The mountain doesn't care about your ego. It just is. And it will kill you if you're not honest with yourself. I understood. His love for the wilderness wasn't just a hobby, it was a moral code. A commitment to honesty, because the consequences of deceit were immediate and brutal. It's why I never really, he trailed off, uncharacteristically hesitant. I never found my person. The dating world, it felt like a game, a performance. I couldn't do it. I'd rather be alone than play that game. He was telling me he was lonely. This strong, capable, independent man was showing me a crack of vulnerability, and it undid me more completely than any confident gesture ever could. I know that game, I said softly. I never want to play it again either. He looked at me then, his eyes reflecting the firelight. The air between us changed, charged with a new, potent electricity. The confession had cleared the space, leaving nothing but raw, honest potential. He reached out, his calloused fingers gently brushing a stray strand of hair from my cheek. His touch was incredibly gentle, a contrast to his rough exterior. My breath hitched. Amelia, he murmured, his voice a low rumble. I didn't let the ghost speak. I leaned into his touch, closing the small distance between us. I kissed him. It wasn't a desperate kiss. It wasn't a kiss of passion born from loneliness. It was a kiss of recognition, of finding a language we both understood after years of speaking in tongues. It was slow, a ND Chinese letter, ING, and deeply, profoundly honest. His hand came up to cradle my jaw, his thumb stroking my cheek, and I felt something hard and frozen inside me finally melt. When we broke apart, we were both breathing a little raggedly. He rested his forehead against mine, his eyes closed. "Okay," he whispered, a world of meaning in the single word: relief, happiness, wonder. "Okay," I echoed, a smile spreading across my face. We didn't need to say anything else. We sat by the fire until it burned down to embers, wrapped in a blanket and each other, watching the impossible expanse of stars. The ghost was gone, silenced not by a shout, but by a quiet, steady truth that was stronger than any lie. The hook of my old pain was gone. Its scar faded under the touch of a man who valued honesty above all else. I was no longer just healing. I was becoming whole again, under a sky full of stars, next to a man who had shown me that some mountains are meant to be climbed together. The first anniversary of the day everything ended came and went, not with a bang, but with a quiet, unremarkable passing. I didn't mark it on the calendar. I didn't light a symbolic candle or burn the last of Daniel's things. I simply woke up, made pancakes with Chloe, and went to work. It was only that evening, as I was locking up the clinic, that I realized the date. The discovery was a soft echo, not a seismic event. The scar was there, but it no longer ached. My life had been rebuilt, not as a replica of the old one, but as something entirely new, sturdier, on a foundation I had poured myself. The new apartment was smaller, but it was mine. The walls were painted colors I'd chosen. The photos were of Chloe and me, of my mother, of a camping trip with Ben where we were both covered in mud and laughing. The ghost of Daniel had been evicted. His tenancy in my mind finally expired. Ben was a constant, a happy, solid, wonderful constant. He had a key to my apartment, and his worn hiking boots lived next to my sensible work shoes by the door. His presence wasn't a disruption, it was a seamless integration. He fit with me, and he fit with Chloe, who adored him with the uncomplicated fervor of a child who felt safe and seen. Tonight was our official movie night. It was a chaotic, popcorn-flying, debate over what to watch ritual that I cherished. Ben was on the floor, letting Chloe style his hair with every clip and band she owned, transforming him into a punk rock mountain man. I watched them from the kitchen, my heart so full I thought it might burst. My phone buzzed on the counter. It was Daniel. "Can we talk? I need to drop off Chloe's bike this weekend, and there's something I need to say." A year ago, that text would have sent me into a tailspin of anxiety. Tonight, it was just a logistical query. I felt nothing but a mild curiosity. Sure, Saturday morning works. Saturday arrived, sunny and clear. Ben had taken Chloe to the park to give me space. When the doorbell rang, I opened it to find Daniel standing there, holding Chloe's pink bike. He looked older. There was a tiredness around his eyes that his dating profile smile couldn't hide. "Hey," he said, his voice tentative. "Hey, thanks for bringing the bike." I took it from him and leaned it against the hallway wall. He stood awkwardly on the welcome mat, a new one Ben and Chloe had picked out. It said "Go away" in cheerful letters. He looked past me, into the apartment, taking in the evidence of my new life. The extra jacket on the hook. The hiking boots. "Looks different," he said. "It is," I agreed, my tone neutral. He shoved his hands in his pockets. I heard you're seeing someone." "I am," he nodded, looking at his shoes. "Jessica and we didn't work out. It was a fantasy, not real life." I didn't say anything. I didn't offer an "I'm sorry" or an "I told you so." I just waited. He took a deep breath, finally meeting my eyes. I was an idiot, Amelia. A selfish, destructive idiot. I had everything. A wife who was smarter and kinder than I deserved. A beautiful daughter. A good life. And I threw it all away for glitter. He said the word with such profound self-loathing, it was almost pitiable. "You did," I said quietly. It wasn't an accusation, it was a fact. "I miss it," he whispered, and for the first time I saw genuine, unperformative grief in his face. "I miss you, I miss us. I know it's too late. I know I burned it all to the ground, but I just needed you to know that. I am so sorry for all of it." I looked at him, this man I had loved for half my adult life, the father of my child. I felt a distant, soft sadness for the us that had died. But that was all. The love was gone. The anger was gone. All that was left was a quiet acceptance of what was and a profound gratitude for what I had now. "Thank you for saying that, Daniel," I said. "I appreciate it, and I forgive you." His eyes widened, hope flaring in them for a split second. I forgive you for me, I continued, my voice gentle but firm, extinguishing that hope. So I don't have to carry it around anymore. But it doesn't change anything. That chapter is closed. My life is different now. It's good. It's peaceful. The hope in his eyes died, replaced by a resigned understanding. He nodded slowly. He's a lucky guy. I'm a lucky woman, I corrected him softly. We're good co-parents, Daniel. Let's focus on that. Let's give Chloe the best of us. He managed a weak smile. Yeah, okay. He turned to go, then paused. For what it's worth, I'm really glad you're happy, Amelia. You deserve it. Then he was gone, walking down the hallway of my building, out of my home, and finally out of my heart for good. I closed the door. I didn't lean against it. I didn't cry. I felt light, unburdened. The last thread tying me to that old pain had been cleanly, finally severed. The front door clicked open again. Ben and Chloe tumbled in, cheeks flushed from the park, laughing about a squirrel that had stolen a cookie. Did Daddy leave? Chloe asked, spotting the bike. He did, sweetie, I said, smiling. He brought your bike back. Cool, she said, already moving on to the next thing. Ben said he'll teach me how to do a wheelie. Did he now? I raised an eyebrow at Ben, who gave me an unrepentant grin. Later, after Chloe was asleep, Ben and I sat on the balcony of my apartment, looking out at the lights of the city. The night air was warm. He held my hand, his thumb tracing slow circles on my palm. You okay? He asked quietly. That couldn't have been easy. I looked at our joined hands. I thought about the journey from that cold leather therapy couch to this warm balcony. From the smell of sandalwood and lies to the scent of night-blooming jasmine and honest sweat. From a marriage built on secrets to a love built on a mountain under the stars. It was easier than I thought, I said, and it was the truth. It felt like closing a book I'd already finished reading. He brought my hand to his lips and kissed my knuckles. I'm proud of you. We sat in a comfortable silence. I thought about the woman I was a year ago, the woman who thought her life was over, the woman who believed the pain would be a permanent resident in her soul. That woman felt like a stranger to me now. Her pain was her own. My life was mine. The transformation wasn't about becoming someone new. It was about uncovering the person who had been buried under the weight of a failing marriage, under the identity of wife, under the debris of betrayal. I was still Amelia, I was still a veterinarian, I was still a mother, but I was also a writer, a hiker, a woman who could fix her own light bulbs but didn't mind when someone offered to help, a woman who was loved, not for who she was expected to be, but for who she authentically was. I had gone to Iceland to run from the pain. I had found a horse to learn how to carry it. And I had found a man who loved me not in spite of my scars, but because they were part of the map that led me to him. The upgrade was never about getting a better husband. It was about building a better life. It was about trading a gilded cage for an open sky. And as I sat there on my balcony, hand in hand with a good man, listening to the quiet sounds of my sleeping daughter's breath from inside, I knew I had finally, truly arrived. The story wasn't about the man who broke me. It was about the woman who put herself back together, stronger and more beautiful than before. And her story was just beginning.